beautiful, quiet, peaceful but chilly day here in Auxhart Garden. The last couple of weeks it has been really warm. It has been warm enough to wear tank tops outside, and now tonight we are getting all the way down to potentially 26 Fahrenheit, which is pretty well below freezing. It's a pretty solid freeze as far as all of these plants are concerned, but it might be the last major frost that we have this year, because we are quickly approaching our last frost date. And at this time of year I would expect to see maybe close to freezing, maybe slightly below freezing, but 26 is pretty low down there. So this is like the last time that I would expect to see temperatures that low. And with the way things have been super warm lately, I am a little concerned about shock on the plants for it getting so cold so fast. So I'm going to go through the tour as usual and kind of focus this week on talking about which plants I am concerned about and whether or not I'm going to do anything to help protect them. So as we're starting out on this first row with the trellis, as always, right here in the front I planted recently a few more spinach starts, and you can see this right here, this little bit of yellowing. It's potentially already frost damage. I think it got down kind of low last night, not nearly as cold as it'll get tonight, but this being a new little transplant, there's a chance that it was just a little more susceptible to that cold damage. Now if we come up and look at the garlic, however, garlic looks pretty good. There's a little bit of purple on the tips of these leaves, and I actually can't remember if that was here before. There was definitely some existing damage on some of the leaves from that big freeze we had back in December, and it has grown out since then. We can look at this newest leaf here, see that there's not really any damage on that, and probably conclude that the garlic was just fine with the temperatures. Garlic is one of those things where I really don't worry about it that much. It can handle almost anything. It can come up through pretty rough mulches and deal with pretty cold temperatures. This one next to it looks pretty good. I don't really see any of that same damage on these leaves, so not super concerned about garlic. You know, it would be nice though is if the freeze came and killed all of this straw grass coming up from the seeds that were left in the straw mulch I got. This second row here has a bit more stuff in it. We do have onions going down the center and a few more scattered here. Onions I would be only slightly more concerned about than garlic. They're very hardy to cold, but they can get damaged just a little bit more easily than garlic. I'm still not going to cover them for this though. I think even if they do get a little damage on the tips, it's not going to be that big of a deal for them to come back from. I am a little bit concerned about these baby lettuces here. These were transplanted same time as that spinach. And while they currently look okay, what I might do is just kind of pull the mulch on top of them to give them a little bit of insulation from that cold. I just got to remember to come back and move the mulch back off of it so that they can get some sun once the cold has passed. Along the outsides of where the onions are, I do have rows of turnips and radishes and carrots. And turnips have been coming up. They are a little covered in straw as the rain and the wind has moved it around. And I am glad that I overseeded because it looks like slugs are kind of chewing on them a little bit. But so far so good. You can see some of that something munching on it kind of damage. So with the straw here, I'm not sure if I have to worry too much about these turnip sprouts. But we'll see. Similarly with these radish sprouts and carrot sprouts, I actually do have little carrots, carrot coming up here in between all of these radishes. These radishes are going fast. They're already putting on their second set of leaves, and looking bigger than those turnips, even though the turnips were planted before them. This one looks like that might have been frost damaged a little bit. You see how it's a little darker and kind of curling on the edges? That could be frost damage. These plants are supposed to be frost hardy much lower than these temperatures, but with no big root to pull from to fill the leaves with sugars, they're a little bit more susceptible to that damage. The reason that plants that can survive a frost do is because they concentrate sugars in their leaves, and when you have a water-sugar mixture, the freezing point of that liquid is lower. So you don't get that crystallization of water that kills all the cells in your plant leaves when there's a higher sugar content. If we keep coming down the row here, there is some frost damage on my potatoes. It's actually worse than I expected. I was out here yesterday and they looked fine, but this is definitely heavily frost damaged on these potatoes. They can take a little bit of a frost, but it must have gotten a little colder than I expected last night. I think these will easily come back from the root, but it definitely sets them back quite a bit as far as growing time. One of my options, had I known that it was going to get that cold, would be to pull some frost fabric over the whole row, which I do finally have now. And that would increase the temperature near the plants by, about 2 or 3 degrees, which can make a big difference when we're talking about just getting a little bit below freezing. Perhaps luckily, none of the newer variety of potato that I planted here has actually popped up yet. And so it has been safe in the ground underneath the straw and likely didn't notice the freeze at all. But since it's getting colder tonight, and if I have time, I might as well go grab some frost fabric and pull it over this entire row here, because this has some of the more sensitive things in the garden right now. My little lettuce seedlings that haven't been planted yet do actually still look really great, considering the frost. You can see there's a little bit of yellowing on these leaves here. They should be quite a bit greener, but I'm thinking that's more likely to be a nitrogen deficiency than frost damage. This one is a little bit of frost damage here. But overall, these look great. My dad had the good idea for me to take all of these to my mom, put them in her garden, which I might end up doing if she wants them. And then on these 2 trellises, we have peas. This variety that is doing really well is continuing to do really well. I don't notice any frost damage on these at all. Again, peas should be pretty darn frost hardy. Not super frost hardy, but 26 shouldn't be too bad for them. I just noticed something interesting. There were a few potatoes over in this area that popped up that I think were just potatoes that didn't get dug from last year. And there have been some zinnias coming up, which I haven't pulled because, well, they're volunteers and they'll probably be very hardy. But I would have expected this to be far more frost tender than this. So I think that that's very interesting that this looks mainly fine except for it's been chewed on, as opposed to this. Oh, I also just noticed right next to this, among all the wild onions trying to grow here, this is my first fava bean sprout. I put this in before this popped up. I was wondering when they were going to start sprouting. Here's another one coming up. Now these are also frost hardy, and they're so low to the ground right now, especially with the straw around them, frost shouldn't really make much of a difference to them. I say shouldn't, but with the weather being really warm for a while and then suddenly getting cold again, there is, like I said, a chance of things getting shocked. Over here near my Brussels sprout, I had planted some poppies. You can see them coming up. They're these pointy looking ones. There are some grass seedlings in here as well. All of these look like grass seedlings that I'll have to come through and kind of painstakingly pull out. But poppies are supposed to be cold hardy as well. So I'm hoping that these are not affected. They don't look like they were affected by whatever temperature ended up being last night. Honestly, even as I'm talking to you and showing you those potatoes, I am really surprised that they are as severely damaged as they are. Potatoes are supposed to be able to take a mild frost, no problem. Alright, and at the front of this last row, we do have most of the lettuce seedlings that I put out. Kale looks fine. Kale is maybe the cold hardiest thing in this whole garden besides the garlic. Kale, once it's big and established, can take really low temperatures. I think I've seen -10 for kale before. And these lettuces over here that were a little more established look fine. Oh, this one's getting munched. That's alright though, making new leaves. Eventually it will outpace whatever's munching on it. This one's looking great. You can see now an even bigger difference between, for example, this red lettuce here that was planted out about a week and a half before this one, even though they were both seeds started on the same day. I'm looking at this pile of straw that I had left over from mulching and thinking maybe I'll take this and pile it on top of the stuff that needs a little extra cover instead of getting out an entire full, long, hard to handle frost fabric. I've got a little over 30-foot rows here, and yeah, that's a lot of fabric to drag across stuff without getting it tangled on stuff, and it's a whole mess. Possibly next winter what I'll do though is have the frost fabric on once it starts getting cold and just leave it in place all winter, because the frost fabric does let light through. I'll show it to you when we get over to the berry patch over there. But let's take a look at this raised bed for a moment. Not a whole lot has changed over here. We've still got little cilantro sprouts, and my teeny tiny baby chamomiles are still alive. You can see this is the biggest one right here. Looking good. Chamomile is frost hardy, and it is tiny right there next to the warm ground. So I'm not very concerned about it. My thyme is just exploding. It looks so good and healthy. I need to probably harvest some of this while it's in its really happy stage. Start drying some so that I have some. And for those of you who haven't been following along, this is my older raised bed, which is a Vigo brand, and my newer raised bed, which is Vegiga. I'm comparing them over the course of the season, see if there's really much of a difference and if I like one of them better. But in this one, which I just put up recently, I planted out more of these lettuce starts for now. And these are looking amazing, of course, in the fresh compost that they've been given. I did not fill all of this volume with compost though. A lot of it is logs and sticks and unfinished compost and half composted straw and such, and really only the top little bit is compost. And I do have a whole video on how to fill raised beds this way and why it works so well and why it really would be a waste to just fill it straight with really good compost. Not just a waste of the nutrition, but also a waste of your money. Check out that video up here. So if we look at this frost fabric here, you can see dandelions through it. It's pretty thin overall. I've been covering the blueberries because this plant over here started making flowers, and blueberries should be alright in a frost, but once they start making flowers, the flowers are a little more sensitive. So let's pull this up and take a look. Oh yeah, this is definitely not good. These were really white and plump yesterday, and now they look a little brown. I think a lot of these flowers are not going to produce fruit, which is very sad. It must have gotten really cold. I know for like buds and stuff, they're a little more cold resistant than the fully open flowers. So I bet a lot of these will be okay. But yeah, that does not look good. I think something I might do for tonight is double up the fabric, the frost fabric. It's pretty wide, and so I have enough to put 2 layers over. The reason I hadn't before is because I knew this was going to be on for several days, and I wanted the plants to still be able to get some sun. And so doubling it up will reduce the amount of sun they get, but if I'm only doing it for one day to keep them through the night, it shouldn't make too much of a difference besides helping keep them a little warmer. You can see the blackberries and the strawberries don't really care. I'm just now, today, right now in front of you, noticing that there's a little bit of a bud on this blackberry. But as I was saying, probably similar to the blueberries, the smaller the bud is, the less susceptible it is going to be to frost damage, because some of the more delicate structures of the flower haven't fully formed yet. It's unfortunate about the potatoes and the blueberries, but everything else looks good. Hopefully it continues to look good after tonight. I started this video thinking that I was going to be talking about preventing this kind of damage, but it turns out I was already too late. As I said though, potatoes are definitely going to come back. You know, it's just going to set them back a little bit. Potatoes can survive over winter in the ground just fine. I mean, I just showed you the ones that came up from potatoes that didn't get pulled. The potato itself will be fine. It probably has plenty of energy to try again. It's just going to be behind. Probably similar with the blueberries. There are a bunch of smaller buds on there that hadn't quite opened up, and those looked all right. So I'll probably just have fewer blueberries instead of 0 blueberries. Before I go, I was moving some of this straw to cover those seedlings, and I found these mushrooms here. I don't know what they are. I definitely did not inoculate this straw with anything. It was just plain old straw. Not entirely sure what these are. They don't quite look like wine caps like what I've planted in this area before. That's really interesting. Definitely not gonna eat them if I can't get a positive ID on them though. If you're new here, I do want to let you know that I do this garden tour every single week. As you've seen, I show you the good and the bad, and talk about my own thought process concerning that in the hopes that it helps you. I'll leave playlists up here to the rest of this year and all of last year if you want to catch up and see how I got the garden to this stage in the first place. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, happy gardening!